Well, hello. This is Josh, the developer of Huddle Genius. Today I am going to be looking at some of the features of the application. We've already explored the draft room in a different video, so in this video I'm going to take a look at the insights and the players. We're going to go ahead and get started here. This is the main menu. As you can see here on the right, we have our alerts, our rankings are out of date, our tiers are out of date. Basically, all this means is that our rankings have not been updated in at least 24 hours. And same for the tiers. Tiers being updated, that's something that I don't think necessarily has to be updated every 24 hours, but it's just kind of a good reminder. People change their opinions on tiers all the time, especially when there's breaking news, a player gets hurt or a player goes to jail, and that will change the tiers quite a bit. So definitely keep an eye on those alerts. You can obviously dismiss the alerts by clicking these close buttons, and they go bye-bye. In the welcome message up here. So, as promised, we're going to dive into the insights here. We have 61 completed drafts using Huddle Genius at the moment. These are real drafts on Underdog. These are the best ball manias. I haven't done any other drafts yet. These things are certainly keeping me busy while developing the program. Here we are logged in as Cool Joe. That is our profile. I should probably go over the profiles at the end of this as well. We're going to go ahead though. Insights. Here we go. So the insight section is what you would expect. It is a reporting section. Basically, we look at the drafts we have completed. We have 61 drafts, as I said. Turn down the music here. So let's start with the planning. The planning section is fairly straightforward. What planning means is that these are the quarterbacks, this planning starting quarterback section. What it's showing is the quarterbacks that Huddle Genius considers to be the starters. For most situations for teams, we know who the starters are, but there are some here we don't know. Like here's the Colts, you got Anthony Richardson, but he may not be the starter. We can adjust that if we want to change who Huddle Genius considers the starter for teams. I believe the other one would be the Browns. Yeah, Joe Flacco here. I think Flacco is favored now, but I know for a while there. Actually, I still think the jury's out on that. I'm not too sure. But yeah, this is just more of a quick view at what quarterbacks could be selected in the draft room for our targeting. If you see anything on there, the whole point of this is you look at it with one glance, say, hey, I don't want that guy on this list, and you can change that. You could also just not even deal with a team's quarterbacks. Like if you did not want either Colt quarterbacks, that'd be very easy to set up. You would just put both of those quarterbacks as skip, and you just wouldn't have to worry about it. We're going to go back here. We are going to go to analysis. And this is where we get the good stuff. We're going to start with the percentage of draft strategy first. So the percentage of draft strategy shows what Huddle Genius has identified in our exposures that we have uploaded. This can be from Underdog or Huddle Genius's own exposures. So if you use Huddle Genius on a site that does not support exposure outputs, Huddle Genius does actually have its own exposure tracking. So I think DraftKings does not have exposure exports at the moment. I think you can use tools to do something like that. But right now, Huddle Genius has you covered. And so anyway, this screen here is showing our percentage of each strategy that Huddle Genius identified. So here's RB Hero. I'm hovering over it. It says we have one running back in rounds 1 and 2, or between rounds 1 and 2, and no other running back until round 7. So we're out of all of our drafts, 2.9% of them have this strategy. Double running back hero. 2 running backs in rounds 1 to 3, and no other running back until round 12 or later. And then you got 0 running back. No running backs until round 7 or later. And you can go through all these. They all have different descriptions. These descriptions are fairly solid. The actual drafting inside of Huddle Genius, if it uses a strategy, isn't always set a certain way. For instance, we may allow the running back a little earlier than round 12 on double running back hero. It just kind of depends. We try to vary things a little bit more. But really the whole point of this is just to be like, hey, I got, you know, you can look right now at a glance and be like, hey, I got a lot of bulldozer wide receiver builds. You know, 4 more wide receivers in the first 6 rounds. That means 4 of the 6 picks at the beginning have wide receivers. It is also very possible that drafts have multiple characteristics. A good example would be elite quarterback and, you know, punt tight end. Elite quarterback, you know, we have 1 quarterback before round 4, and punt tight end, no tight end until round 13. That's possible. Those things can go together. Late quarterback, you know, that could pretty much go anywhere too, you know, no quarterback until round 12. Unclassified means that the draft has no identifying characteristic listed above. So in a lot of those cases, it's just different things all happening. You know, nothing, there's no characteristic about it that can define it. Not many slip through like that. A lot of those ones are drafts that use the general best ball strategy where it's more of a balanced draft. It's not doing anything too wild. We're going to go ahead and back out of this. We're going to head over to the drafting habits. So the drafting habits is an interesting section. It basically shows you drafts where you're picking players in the same order over and over. So what it's saying here at the top, in 4.9% of our drafts, we have Jacoby Myers and Tony Pollard. And that's the order they're picked. So we always pick Jacoby Myers, Tony Pollard. Or 3.3%, they're Cooper Kupp, then Mark Andrews. This isn't anything that's alarming, but if you're drafting not using Huddle Genius and you import your data, you might find that there are patterns you're repeating a lot. And that's what this section helps you identify. You might be like, wow, I always pick these 2 players together, and it'll be right in front of you and you'll know it. You can also increase the pattern size down here at the bottom. You can go up to, you can go all the way up to 5. The odds of you repeating something like that twice is fairly unlikely. Something is only listed here if you picked it at least twice, by the way. Otherwise, you know, the list would just go on and on. But you can see here we did pick a Dunze Montgomery and Josh Downs twice. I'm assuming that's the number there, so we're going to back out here. We are going to go to the exposure section. The player exposure is fairly self-explanatory. We actually have a more robust section that also has the same data in the player section, which I will explore after the insight section. But this is also just another simple exposure list. You can see exactly what you got. You can see here, Huddle Genius doing a good job keeping our exposures very, very tame. Right now, the system is allowing 12.5% for myself, so all these 13.1s are players that have just gone over once, and we're waiting for them to come back down. All right, we're going to back out of here. And let's move over to the positional tier insight. So this basically shows you your exposure to each position by tier. These exposures are isolated to just the position, so this number would add up to 100. Basically, you can see our most picked quarterback, our tier 4 quarterbacks. And I don't think that's anything unusual. I mean, you probably would not see, a higher one unless you tend to draft quarterbacks earlier. Using Huddle Genius, it could be all over the place depending on the strategies you use. You can go down here, we can pick different positions, running back. And again, these tiers, by the way, these are brought in from a third party. The thing with Huddle Genius is it is not a projection service. You would be bringing in your own tier list from a third party. We do not provide any guesses. That is totally up to you what you want to provide for tiers. Pick your favorite provider, pick your favorite website, pick your favorite YouTuber who makes tier lists and plug them in. We do support tier lists up to 20. If a tier list is above 20, then it will automatically convert to a ranking system, which will also convert it back to 20. Some people don't make tiers, but instead just, rank the players from 1 to whatever. We highly recommend, though, using a tier-friendly CSV list. And here's our tight ends finally. All right, we are going to go ahead and back out of this. We are going to go on to the team exposure now. Team exposure is a great tool. It basically shows you your exposure to each team. Fairly simple. The numbers in red means that you are below kind of the average of if you pick the team 1 out of 32 and then half of that. And then the green numbers mean you're picking things about twice more than the 1 out of 32 number. You can see here we have a lot of Ravens and Steelers. And by a lot, we're just saying, 0.3% more. It's nothing too drastic. Again, I'm using Huddle Genius, so my exposures are very, very balanced. Now, it'd be interesting, if you plug this in, drafting by hand, doing 100 drafts and seeing what your exposures would be. Down here at the bottom, this is where things even get more interesting. You can filter your exposures by rounds. So here we can see our team exposure for just the first round. Here you can kind of guess who's who just by looking. Ravens here means we're picking Derrick Henry in the first round. This Cardinals would be McBride in the first round. And of course, oh no, I'm sorry, that might also be Marvin Harrison. I'm not sure. It's one of those two. Bengals is Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb here for the Cowboys. Lions, you got Gibbs, you got Amon-Ra. No surprise to see the Lions here with the most, since you got 2 Lions in that first round. But basically, it just tells a story of what you're picking. And what you can do down here also is you can set a range. So let's say we want to know what teams we picked in the first 6 rounds. We can hit 6, and there you go. Everything from rounds 1 to 6 is now in this list. So these are showing you which teams you're putting the most draft capital into early. This is the first third of the draft in Underdog, first 6 rounds. You can also see hey, I'm not picking any Patriots. There's probably a good reason for that. Either I don't want them or they're not early enough to be picking that early. Another thing you can do too is right click this and then you can set a minimum range. So let's say we want between just 7 and 9. This is the teams we picked between 7 and 9. So again, you can get an idea of everything. We're going to go ahead and back out of this. Lastly, we are going to explore the matchup exposure. The matchup exposure is basically the games that we have the most at stake in. So, as you saw earlier, we have a lot of Steelers and Ravens, and no surprise, there we are, Steelers and Ravens, our dream game here, week 14, Steelers-Ravens, that's where we got the most stuff going on, and you can see it right there. 8.3. This is basically the exposure for that. But here's what's really cool too. Again, there is this down here at the bottom where you can set your round that you want to be looking at. So let's just look at round 1. So here are our first picks going head to head. We got Cowboys and Lions. We got Lions and Ravens. We got Lions and Rams. So you can just see where your most important matchups are throughout the season based on where you're picking. And again, here we go. We can go with the draft capital. Let's say the first 6 rounds of the draft. And again, no surprise. Lots of Lions, Eagles, Ravens. You can kind of see here. But again, it kind of gives you an eye, something to keep an eye out when the season's happening. You're like, hey, this is going to be a big spike week for me if such and such game really goes off. Week 11 here, Lions and Eagles. Okay, well, that's good for our picks in the first 6 rounds. We can also go ahead and go to the last page. We just go next. Let's say we go way to the end. These are the games we don't want to do much. We want these to be low-scoring slugfest. Giants, Patriots, Browns, Patriots, Falcons, Patriots. We don't have these players. We don't care. We can even do this. Let's clear everything. This is a better view of everything. You can see here, these are the games we just don't have much going on in. So if we were watching this football game on TV right now, the Jets and Dolphins in week 4, we don't want much to go on. We want that game to be, 0-0, hopefully. All right, we're going to go ahead and back out of this. Last but not least, we are going to move over to the visual section. The team ADP investments. Now, this one here is very, very, very interesting. What represent these moving little globes. The bigger the globe, the more ADP we sunk into a team. So it's very similar to what we were looking at with the exposures. Basically, how it works is the earlier we pick a player, the more it adds to a team to the power of 0.5, which what that means is, you know, you're picking the first round's worth twice as much as you're picking the second round. Your second round pick's worth twice as much as the third round pick, and so on. So again, no surprise, there is the Lions, the big giant globe. If you were somebody that was picking the first round fairly evenly, you will probably see a big Lions globe there. Because with 2 Lions in the first round, it's kind of hard not to imagine seeing that. And then you can kind of start to see the second and third round favorites popping up there, like the Ravens. You know, you got Derrick Henry, you got Lamar Jackson, you got Zay Flowers. Some higher ADP players exist for that team. And again, because we're using Huddle Genius, everything's fairly balanced. Again, if you were somebody drafting by hand and popping this up for the first time after doing 100 drafts without thinking about it, you could see something completely different. These are fairly balanced teams. So what you see reflects more or less the ADP picks of if you're picking somewhat balanced. And again, too, you can see with those teams we faded, like Cleveland, tiny little globe floating around there. We have not spent much draft capital on them. The Bears there, a sad little globe floating. There's not much with us with the Bears. There's the Patriots, almost non-existent. I'm not even sure you can see the globe, but it is there somewhere. And again, you can watch these bounce around all day, or you can back out of here. We're going to go ahead and back out of here. By the way, before I do that, every section does have a help button that just explains it a little bit better. All right, let's back out. We're going to go back to the menu. And we are going to head over to the player section. So the player section, as I was saying before, when we were looking at the exposures, the player section is basically the main one-stop section for everything having to do with players, managing players as well. You can manage everything with players right here in this section. You don't have to work with any third-party text files outside of the program. I originally had it set up that way, but I decided with this 1.0 release, we would have those player settings right here built into the program, built into Huddle Genius. And let's go ahead and explore all of the goodies here in front of us. So by default, the program appears. We have the list of the players. You can see those here. These are sorted by ADP. There's no filtering. You can see the exposures here. Again, these exposures are not color-coded unless the only way they're color-coded is if we see something that is blocked for us. How this is red, that means we are not picking that player, as you can see. And this is live. This could either be something from exposure, or it could be an identifier that we have that is blocking that player from being picked. And this is also updated live and in real time. If we change identifier, something could change. And I'm actually going to show that off here. We're going to go ahead and look at teams. Let's just click on the Cardinals. There is the Cardinals. So right here, we can see a few things that are interesting. This Xavier Weaver, he's 0%. You might be wondering, why is he 0%? In our settings, in our preferences, we have a setting that if a player is projected for 0 points on the Underdog ranking, we will just automatically hide them. And that is why he is hidden. You can enable that if you want also. I don't really see a reason to enable it. The only bad thing about having it enabled is that the free agent players are also projected for 0 points since they're not on a team. So that is something to keep in mind. You know, right now, Amari Cooper, as of the time of this recording, is a free agent. So, you know, Amari Cooper is not going to show up anywhere. So something to keep in mind. So let's just swing over to the Chiefs. That's one that I was just working with a minute ago. And this is actually, you can see here with Rashee Rice. If you are somebody that follows football right now, you know that Rashee Rice got in a little real life trouble. He's possibly facing a suspension. So what I added was this icon down here, faded player. So what these down here do, they let you assign characteristics to players. As you can see here, we got rushing quarterbacks. If you set a quarterback as a rushing quarterback, it will pick the quarterback as a naked pick. That means that it does not stack the quarterback. This is purely an option. I don't necessarily think that you want to do that. You know, there are definitely rushing quarterbacks like Josh Allen that is a perfectly reasonable naked stack quarterback. The program will sometimes filter out wide receivers anyway if you get too much shared exposure. So it can end up working out the same way if you choose to just, you know, let the program do its magic and then just set the shared exposure very strictly. Otherwise, if you just want to say, hey, I never want to worry about pairing so-and-so with their receivers, you can enable this rushing quarterback and that will do the job. Like, let's just say, oh, let's just pretend we want Patrick Mahomes to be a rushing quarterback. We click that, click Patrick Mahomes. There it is. Not that we want that for Patrick Mahomes. We're going to go ahead and remove that. But that just gives you an idea. You can set that very easily. And what's really nice about this list, you just click one of these characteristics and you just click down the list depending on what you want to do. These are really, and I should just mention, these are all fine-tuning options. These are not things that are required. You don't have to go through all, you know, 400, 300 players and assign characteristics. This is if you want to take your Huddle Genius application to the next level and go through and adjust things even further than they already are in the preferences. So let's explore a little more here. Receiving running backs. Basically, this treats a running back like a receiver for stacking purposes. There are definitely running backs that are somebody I would, like Bijan Robinson I have is considered as a receiver. I think Jahmyr Gibbs would be another good, arguably good receiving running back. We can go ahead and assign that right now while we're looking at it. I think Christian McCaffrey, sure, why not? Basically, you know, the guys like, you know, Derrick Henry you don't want, right? He's not really known for that. So I just went ahead on these early ones. I just went ahead and assigned that rushing running back right there. See how easy that was? Oh, I just clicked it once, went down, clicked those guys, all done. We can even go to the second round, do the same thing if we wanted. If there's anybody that stood out to us. No, not Taylor. Bucky Irving, sure. He probably should be. Josh Jacobs, I think so. I think so. Chase Brown, for sure. Look at that. We're doing things right now, even during the demonstration. So here we are. Let's look at the next thing. We got skip player. Skip player means exactly what you think it means. Skip the player. Skip the player. That's exactly what it means. We're not going to pick that player. It's just that simple. If you don't want a player, add him to the skip player. It's done. You will not pick him anymore. And, you know, that could be an alternative. So basically, I should just say all three of these right here, they're all very similar. They adjust the exposure rules. So skip player, we don't pick the player no matter what. No matter what the exposure is, we're not picking them. Faded player, I'm sorry, this and these two have to do with exposure. Faded player here, I talked about that briefly, but basically what that is it treats the player as it only allows half the exposure we allow. So let's say we allow 18% of any player. This would allow only 9%. Now, in my case, I allow 12.5% exposure, so this, you know, reduces to what, 6.25? And then you got favored player, which does the opposite. Favored player allows double your set exposure for any player. If you really believe in somebody, you can go ahead and put them as a favored player, and you'll get twice as much of whatever your exposure rule is. Again, if you had 12% allowed, it would go up to 24% before it would start blocking that player out. And last but not least, the forced starting quarterback. So the forced starting quarterback is what I was talking about earlier. You can set the quarterback for a team as the starter. Right now, here's Joe Flacco. I chose him. If I did not choose him, it would pick whoever is a higher ADP quarterback. Right now, he is the highest ADP quarterback. But like, let's say for whatever reason I thought Kenny Pickett was going to start. I could set him, and then it would force him as the starting quarterback instead of Flacco. By default, the program chooses the highest ADP quarterback for a team as the starter. So it is something to keep in mind. If you got breaking news that so-and-so's the starter, you know, go in the program and quickly adjust that before the ADPs do, and you can stay ahead of that. So, and again, with breaking news, like, here's Quinshon Judkins. I put him as a fade. You know, he's another one facing time suspension, so I'm not completely skipping him, but I don't really want him at exposure. So what I'm doing is saying, hey, I want him to come down, and he has come down a bit. He's still being not picked still. Again, mine's 12.5%, so he's gonna be skipped another time or at least before he's even considered. And that, by the way, is the end of the players section right now. I'm gonna go ahead and exit this, hit the escape button, and we're out of here. We are now gonna go ahead and head over to the profile section. So the way Huddle Genius works is everything is contained within profiles. These profiles are meant to just be kind of a humorous twist on fantasy football. You can choose any of these 8 profiles, and all of your settings, exposures, player identifiers, all are contained within that profile. Very useful if you have a PC where you want to share this program with somebody else. It is also very, very useful if you want to use different profiles for different websites. You know, let's say we want Cool Joe to use Underdog and TikTok OC to use DraftKings. It makes it a little easier. Then you don't have to keep swapping back and forth your preferences, and you don't have to keep worrying about which exposures you have in there. In fact, I highly recommend it. You're not going to want to use the same profile for multiple websites. And hopefully 8 is enough. We're going to go ahead and exit this. We are now going to head over to the preferences. This could take a while. I'm not going to go through every single thing. When designing Huddle Genius, a big part of what I wanted to do is make sure that you as the user have control. So we're going to go ahead and check out General here. General is, like the name implies, a lot of different things. You got your roster size here, which goes from 18 to 20. Basically, if you're on Underdog, it'd be 18. If you're on DraftKings, it's 20. I don't know if anybody uses 18 or 19, but I'd probably not recommend clicking that. We have our import exposures from generated output folder. I highly recommend just leaving this on. That is what I was talking about before, where Huddle Genius uses its own exposure system. Now, what's really cool about Huddle Genius also is this is meant to supplement exposures that you bring in as well. So let's say I download my Underdog exposures and I have this checked. It will not duplicate anything. If it detects that you have the same exact lineup twice, it'll throw out one of them. It's only going to have unique values, so you don't have to worry about there being duplicates. What you do have to worry about is if you test out a draft and you leave that exposure inside the folder, then you could have false exposure. So what I recommend doing is visiting your exposure folder once in a while. Make sure that everything in there looks good. Your other option, of course, is to just uncheck this and only bring in your Underdog draft exposures. But again, some websites don't have exposures, so that's something you'll have to figure out if you are going a different route. But I highly recommend just leaving it checked, honestly. The shared exposure setting allows you to fine-tune how you want shared exposures to work. Shared exposures is how much you allow 2 players to be on the same team together paired. So this is a good way to make sure you don't have like way too much of these 2 players over and over and over together. In reality, yes, stacking's great, but sometimes somebody gets hurt and you'll be sunk. So that's what this is all about. This is about getting that one team to win. We're trying to make our teams different. That's the point of Huddle Genius. We want unique teams, unique lineups. And down here you got the best ball site. This basically controls which folder we read our rankings from when you bring in your CSV file from whatever site you choose to use here. So far, we only support Underdog, Fantasy, and DraftKings. And those are those 18 and 20 team rosters. Auto sim down here basically lets you simulate a draft. I'm going to go ahead and just show that really quickly. I've never actually showed that before. I'm going to show that really quickly. So since we exited the settings and changed it, we are reloading the program here really quickly. And it is pretty quickly. So the simulation, basically what it is we click a number up here at the top, and then it will automatically create a team using the selected strategy. These are very more for fun, to be honest. So let's just hit 6. Boom, boom, boom. Look at that. A team was made. Isn't that amazing? So yeah, there's nothing really to say with that one, but it's just kind of more for fun than anything. All right, we're gonna go ahead and exit this. All right, so going back to the main menu, we're gonna go ahead and uncheck that auto sim. I may not include the auto sim in the release. It's more for fun for my purposes, but there's nothing too exciting about it. So let's head over to stacking. This is where things get very, very important for yourselves. You can prioritize the position or stacking. Position means that when we're picking, when our strategies are decided, we're respecting our strategies more. So if you're doing RB hero, we're going to stick with what our game plan is. If you choose stacking as your prioritization, it will not care about your strategy as much. If you're doing hero running back, for instance, and you should be picking a hero running back, the draft manager will say, hey, there's a stack available in that same round. We're going to go ahead and just go with the stacking. It'll also allow soft targets to be picked there. So personally, for me, I recommend position, but really it kind of comes down to your personal choice. Target per quarterback goal. This is how many soft targets we want to assign per quarterback. In the future, I would actually like to have this set on a quarterback by quarterback basis. And that probably will be something that I will, have in a future release. But right now it's basically a flat value. And again, if you have a quarterback set as a rushing quarterback, it will not seek any targets. Targets reach. This is how far we're willing to reach for soft targets. Soft targets are, again, things we're trying to get in advance. So I highly recommend, allowing 12 at least here. I don't recommend less than that. You could end up not having any targets at all if you set it too low, or, very, very limited. And the safety buffer basically just puts a little ADP gap in between our pick and what we allow. This just helps ensure that picks are there when we get there. These also, both of these impact the quarterback targets as well, not just the soft targets. Lastly, down here at the bottom, we have the relevant matchup weeks. These weeks are the matchups that we want to stack. You can click anything you want here. The best ball playoffs are 15 through 17 in Underdog. I think they are in DraftKings as well. So I have all three of those checked. But, in reality, I think most people focus upon 17th. You can also just not have any of them checked. Again, the shared exposure will make sure that things don't get overstacked. But again, it's just like I was saying before with stacking, that maybe you don't always want to have that game stack. Maybe that game stack is going to be what sinks you later or earlier in best ball. All right, we're going to go ahead and go over to the reach. Reach basically is even more about reaching for targets when we're generating picks. Again, here is the prioritization, ADP or stacking. In this situation, it orders how the list works in Draft Manager. If we have ADP, we're going to focus more on ADP value. If we have stacking, we're going to be focused more on stacking. I have stacking selected here. I think that I tend to prefer that, and I like to see more stacking choices. This also impacts not only team stacking, but also the game stacking of the your picks here, down here at the bottom, the relevant matchup weeks. The hard round 1 reach limit is how far you can reach in the first round. I think that is arguably the most important round on reaching. And it is the one round where I don't think you really want to reach, just because if you're doing drafts, you only have so many picks in each spot. And let's say you get the third pick, you probably don't want to reach that far. You probably just want to pick the third pick. And you can actually limit that. I'll show you how. But this limits how far you'll reach in the first round. The lowest you can go is 4, but you can also supplement this setting in the next section. I'll show you in a minute. The base reach limit is your base reach limit for every round, not called round 1. This is basically how far you will be willing to go to reach a tier. Of course, if nothing works for your reach. We'll expand that until we get some options. 12, again, is kind of my recommendation. The max reach for quarterback controls the starting quarterbacks a little bit. It doesn't change what appears in the starting quarterback, but it's the farthest we're willing to reach. So right now, if you have it set as 200 and we do not have a quarterback after 200 set as a starting quarterback, the program will not target those quarterbacks. So for instance, the Cleveland Browns, all the quarterbacks are after 200. If we do not set any of those quarterbacks as a starting quarterback, we simply will not have those as targets. The supplemental tier reach just populates the player list with more tiers. The most that will ever get in the list is 12 players anyway, so I recommend just setting this as 2. You probably won't need it higher than that unless your tier list is very strange. Here is the advanced settings. And these, I know they're called advanced, but let's face it, these right here at the top, man, you need to set these 2. So maximum exposure, that is how much you want to allow a player. It's just that simple. The faded players and the favored players, those can be adjusted, which change how much we allow those, as we discussed in the player section. Ignore the setting information window right now. That is out of date because nowadays we just have those built right in. Handy. Shared exposure, this is what I was also talking about. This is how much we allow 2 players to be paired together. And again, this is impacted by the setting right here, the shared exposure setting. So you can use an average, a high, or a low, depending on how you want that to be calculated. I highly recommend just using average, but you can honestly change it. Low means that it's way stricter, high means that it's less strict, and average is somewhere in the middle. Just the calculation, I mean. It doesn't change the percentage, but it changes the way it's calculated. The Force ADP list. This is another big one. What this is telling the program is if you are a pick in the draft, you do not want to pick anything higher than that pick. So I have it set for pick 1. If I get the first pick in the draft, I'm going to pick Jamar Chase right now, as of this recording. Because you don't see the first pick that often, and if I get the first pick, I don't want to pick something other than the first pick. I probably have plenty of the other ones. Let's pick the first pick. And you can adjust this. You can say, hey, whatever it is, you can even go up to pick 36 if you want, but there's no reason to do that. So what this does is it also tells the program not to use that pick for something else. So when we're determining our targets, we won't consider the first round in this case. The early round quarterback consideration tells us how many quarterbacks we're willing to pick, or what are considered early quarterbacks. So if we have this set to 10, we will not pick more than 1 quarterback before this round. It doesn't mean that we're going to pick a quarterback before this round, but it means that we will not pick more than 1 quarterback before this round. And again, you can adjust this however you want. You can set it to 0, which makes no sense, or you can set it all the way up to 14. Obviously, if you set it at 0, we have no rules, basically. I highly recommend leaving it 10, 9. You know, the choice is yours. Obviously, the strategy too that's determined will influence when the quarterbacks are picked, but no matter what, we'll always respect this setting. Last but not least, we got the advanced filter. What this does is it actually filters your players ahead of time, right as soon as they're imported into the program. So what this does is if you have no team, players without teams will automatically be excluded from the players. We just will not use them for picks. Those include free agents. The no projections is what I talked about briefly in the reports. Basically, it means that if a player has 0 projected points in Underdog's the export, then that means we're not going to pick it. And again, that does take care of the players with no teams. So these 2 settings are kind of redundant. So this is just a more strict version of this. But this only works for Underdog. DraftKings does not export the projected points. Graphical user interface. This is probably the easiest one to explain. It just controls if you want sound, if you want music. Last but not least, we got the bye weeks. This tells the program how much you want your bye weeks respected. how many of each position being picked here and how many we're going to let go through. So as you can see here, if we are picking a team with 2 quarterbacks, we're only going to have 1 quarterback that allows the bye week. If we're picking 3 quarterbacks, we'll allow 2. If we slide this, look, we can change that number. So you could say, even if I'm picking 3 quarterbacks, I only want 1 ever to have the bye week. We don't want even 2 to match. And this does influence the way the targeting works, the soft targeting works, and as well as your player exposures. You can set these numbers to 100 also, and we just won't care about bye weeks. If you do not care about bye weeks, set all these to 100, and the program will just pick. It will not care about bye weeks at all. Obviously, with best ball, you do want to care about bye weeks. I'm pretty sure, especially in the eliminator and some of those, yeah. But you get the point here. Basically, if you set quarterback and tight end to 67, you will allow that second, you allow a match basically if you're picking 3. For the running backs and wide receivers, you got a little bit more to think about because we go all the way up to 7 and 10. So it is definitely worth taking a look at those. All right, the last thing I'm going to go to is the strategies. And again, because I changed my settings here, we are going to reload the program. All right, strategies. This is the last section I'm going to cover. Basically, all the strategies is the list of strategies that the program will use when you use the draft manager. The weight adjusts how often you want that strategy to appear. Right now, when you start the program for the first time, everything is set to 5. That means everything has the exact same chance of appearing. If for some reason you wanted a balanced, you know, like let's say we just wanted more balanced pick, we could adjust general best ball to be a little bit higher. General best ball is the most balanced strategy. But in a weird way, if you just have everything set to 5, you'll also kind of end up with a balanced amount of rosters, if that makes sense, because you're going to be using all the strategies kind of equally. But if for some reason you just want to say, hey, I want like I just always want to do something like this. Actually, hold on. Reset. Boom. So what this means is basically we're going to be doing about 2 of these to any time we get one of these. Because the weight is 10. These are all 5. So that does mean that most of the time we are going to get a best ball. As long as this rolls over 5, we're going to get a general best ball strategy. And again, you can look through these. Again, the whole concept of Huddle Genius is to not think like a human. So the whole strategy, the whole concept is we start the program, we start a draft, whatever the dice rolls is what we go with. And that's kind of how I designed this program to work. So, you know, using these strategies, it's meant to really mix up your rosters. It isn't, hey, I'm going to repeat this strategy all 150 drafts. I've done that a few seasons. Last season, everybody was really high on basically a 0 running back. And it did not work. You did not want to do 0 running back last year. You got burned really, really bad. And I did a lot of drafts that were that way. So now, using Huddle Genius, I'm not doing that very often. Everything is randomized the second I hit the draft button. And yeah, that's basically the strategy. No pun intended. The strategy of the strategy section is that we explore these different roster building construction, and just by forcing these positional strategies, you're already diversifying your rosters because you're not picking the players at the same spots. You know, you're just not doing it. You know, if you do a late quarterback, you're not going to be picking a quarterback until rounds 10 and 12. So that means you're always going to have things a little bit different. And it just allows, I mean, all these strategies put together with your shared exposures and exposures, you're going to have a lot of different types of teams. So that covers all of the sections here. The help section basically is just, you know, as the name implies, help. But basically that covers everything here. Hopefully this showed off a little bit of how the program works. Some of the things you saw in this recording will probably be changed by the time the game is officially live. But hopefully you enjoyed watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask on the forum. Have a good day.